everybody. Thanks for having me back to Arizona. I'm happy to say I've actually been back in Arizona in the last decade. I just haven't been back. I just didn't, you know. I have a 14-year-old son who loves maps, and starting when he was about, do I need this? Can I just talk? Because I'm from New York, and if you can't hear me, then it's not a technology problem. So I have a son who's now 14. He's always loved maps. Starting when he was about 6, we would take 2 weeks every summer, and I'd let him plan the route, and we would go on a road trip. And so I have been through the Oklahoma Panhandle more often than anyone who grew up in New York and lives in San Francisco should have the opportunity to go to the Oklahoma Panhandle. But I also get to go through Arizona and spend some time in Arizona on all of those trips. So we have about a little bit more than an hour, and I'm going to talk very quickly because what I really want to do is get past the stuff I have to say and have a conversation with you. But before I do any of that, let me just frame what I'm trying to do here. First, I'm going to try to make you a little bit uncomfortable, and then I'm going to tell you that it's all okay. And then I hope to inspire you for the year ahead and the years to come, because what we're really standing at is the beginning of a very exciting new moment shaping period in philanthropy that I actually believe is as fundamental as was this same moment in time about 100 years ago when John Rockefeller invented the modern foundation. It is a creation. It was something, it was an enterprise form created to service a particular purpose. It's now so familiar to us that we don't often take the time to stop and think about it. You're busy doing it. I have the luxury of taking the time to stop and think about it. And I think we're about to invent the next century's version of both the modern foundation, the rules that guide it, the practices that make it work, and really the future of how we use our private resources for public good, which is this big, messy space called civil society and nonprofits and foundations. So we're really standing at the beginning of something quite significant. And you're already quite familiar with this. I've had a few conversations with folks in the room before lunch and realized that folks are already sort of starting to feel this going on, but they don't quite know what lines up next to what. So that's where we're going to start. First, I want each of you to, we're going to do the next little exercise in silence, except for me. But you're going to be silent. So let me just ask you to first take a deep breath and realize it's going to be okay. Okay? Because the next thing I'm going to do is ask you to stand up and take out your cell phones. And open up your phone to the photo app, the video app. Get it ready to take a video. Once you've done that, look around the room and go find somebody who you don't know and stand next to that person. Okay? Hopefully there's enough new faces in the room. You can actually find someone you don't know. But remember, there's no talking. No talking. No talking. Has everybody got somebody? If you found somebody that you already know, that's okay too. No talking. The hardest part for philanthropists. Don't talk. Okay. So you got your phones open to the video app? And you've got somebody you haven't met yet? Hand that person your telephone. Swap phones. Okay? Everybody done that? You can't hear me back there? Okay, so you should have your new friend's phone in your hand. And you're going to introduce yourselves now, answering, let's make it 4 questions. Okay, so you're going to video your new friend introducing him or herself to you, and then you're going to swap. But each of you are going to introduce yourself with the following 4 questions. I want you to tell your new friend your name, the organization you're with, your phone number, and quickly, if you can, and if you can't, just pass on it, what on earth I might mean by this phrase, digital civil society. Okay? So those 4 things: name, organization, phone number, and digital civil society. Video it, and then the other person goes. Go ahead. When you're done, hold on to the other person's phone.
Alright, so we're still hanging on each other's phones?
When you're done, you can sit back down, but hold on to the other person's phone. So when you're done, hold on to the other person's phone, but sit back down.
We'll see.
Do you want me to stand still so you can do
Nope, it's okay, I got it. Thank you.
I will rove all over the room. Okay, if you can sit back down, you should still have your new friend's phone in your hand. Don't give back your phone. Make sure you have the other person's phone in your hand. Or on your desk or whatever. You don't need to hold it in your hand. So, who has some thoughts about that? What was that all about?
We were sharing things digitally.
You absolutely were sharing things digitally. Any other thoughts about it? Anybody having withdrawal from not having their phone in their hand? Yeah, here.
I was just going to say, I noticed there's a digital device. I didn't know how to turn my video on, and the person did it for me.
It's always good to ask for help.
Everyone had one.
Everybody has one. Did anybody not have a phone? Oh, right on. Is that because you don't own a phone or because you didn't bring it with you?
I do not own a phone.
Yes. Every now and then. I mean, it's very rare, but every now and then. And starting to get more and more, and we'll talk about why. Anything else? Yeah, please.
An opportunity to see how it can be used to actually build a relationship or learn something about another person.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I hadn't even thought of that. Why silence, do you suppose?
Because you never do that. I don't think you ever share phones like that.
Right. I mean, how many of you found it very uncomfortable to give away your phone? How many of you are going to be, you know, in like having DTs an hour from now and finally get your phone back? But the silence is different. Why the silence?
Because you can't communicate.
What silence? Touche. You guys were not so good on the silent part. I'm going to let you think about that for a little bit. Oh yeah, do you have a thought?
Well, the new digital civil society, I believe, is what is replacing the current society. The current society has a lot of personal interaction back and forth. The digital society does not.
And that beautifully put. I'm not sure it's replacing it, but it's joining it. When you sit down to your computer, are you talking to it? Okay then. Like I said, there's one in every crowd. Partly, there's a couple of reasons about the silence, and I mean mostly it's to get you to just sort of think about your body and your sense of self a little bit more, because it's very easy to just start chatting with somebody and not focus on the experience. But also we do a lot of this incredible amount of interaction now, but we're not actually talking to anybody. Although some of us are talking to our computers apparently. Which of the 4 questions, if any, felt the strangest to answer? To introduce yourself, you're by. Introduce yourself using that question.
The phone number.
Why?
Because I don't usually say my phone number.
How many of you knew your phone number? Of the 4 questions, which did you not know the answer to? The last one, but that's not the one that feels uncomfortable. It's the one you do know, your phone number that you're giving away. Why does it feel weird to give away your phone number?
You don't know how to
to your life.
Yeah, it's the portal to your life. Yeah. Okay, you got it. That's the point.
Well,
Yes.
and you're giving it to somebody you really don't know.
That's right. Did anybody feel like the minute I started this, you didn't want to do it? Why did you do it then? I told you to. I mean, come on. I'm leaving in 2 hours. I have no power over you. Seriously. Why? Yes, I told you to, but really, you did. I got you to do something you didn't want to do.
You said it would be okay.
You wanted to be agreeable. I did say it would be okay.
Everyone else was doing it.
Everyone else was doing it. Yeah, in the back.
We're deferential to someone we see as in charge.
So imagine me as the computer screen now, right? You also, I'm going to guess, because I do this too, I think we all do it, we actually hand over that kind of power. We're deferential to this kind of request for information from inanimate computer screens all day long as well. So my encouragement is the next time somebody like me comes in and asks you to do something you don't want to do, don't do it. Okay, thank you very much. I like to start with that because I think a lot of what's going on and a lot of why digital civil society is becoming what it is because we are habituating ourselves to certain behaviors. We're allowing ourselves, we're engaging in, some of us are actively, excitedly choosing a whole set of interactions and behaviors that come from our interactions with these technologies, and we rarely, if ever, have a chance to stop and consider if they actually make sense for what we're trying to do in our roles in civil society. And what I'm really hopeful we as a sector will be doing now and next year and probably for about the next 5 or 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, I don't think it's that long a period. We'll have to figure this out. I think we can solve it in that time frame, is figure out which of these behaviors actually make sense for us and which of them don't. And then engage in those that make sense and push back on those that don't. And that's actually in far more academic, flowery language. That's what we're working on at Stanford. Now, I'm going to talk about a couple of things here that could easily slide into an incredibly boring lecture on thermodynamics, economics, and legal systems. If anybody feels that I'm starting to go there, stop me. Okay, stop me. I'm going to do my very best not to go down any of those paths. I wanted to just flag, this is actually the launch. You are the first people in the country, in the world, to get copies of the new blueprint. It's on your table. It's right here in this fabulous purple, which I have to say I didn't know what it looked like till I got here. So please take a copy. All of my thinking about this, a lot of it is reflected in this year's blueprint. It's also been building for 6 years. This is the 6th annual of these. Next time somebody has the great idea of doing an annual paper, next time I have the great idea of doing something on an annual basis, I'm going to stop myself. Annual comes around every year. But here it is, so please enjoy it. It's also available online for free, and these are free as well. So what is digital civil society? Here's my definition. You guys, I'm interested to hear yours as well. But what we're really talking about is all the ways we use our private resources for public benefit in the digital age. So private resources can be a lot of things. They can be time, they can be money, they can be knowledge, and increasingly they are digital data. Increasingly those things, particularly money and knowledge, are encapsulated in a form of digital data, and it's becoming something that we need to figure out how to manage and govern. And that's really sort of why this is all important. And then we can do it, all these things with it. The same things in many cases that we've been doing with other resources for hundreds, if not thousands of years. Civil society, this space where we do things for other people, that's academic jargon for doing something for somebody else. What we're doing is using the things that we control, our time or our money or our information, and sharing them to make something better for someone else. We might also benefit, but generally someone else is, some community, some group is the beneficiary of those actions. It's very familiar to you, I hope. But here's the landscape in which we now do it. Now this has nothing to do necessarily with the digital space. This is just, as Marissa was saying, this is actually a incomplete picture of where good happens nowadays. And there's another version of this in the blueprint, which you can take a look at, which has a little more detail. But it's not just a relationship between nonprofits and philanthropy. It probably never has been. I would argue it never has been. But we've focused in on that one-to-one relationship for a really long time. And one of the first things we have to recognize is that good is coming from a lot of different places. It's not always clear exactly where those places fit in. I want to point out two or three of these. First of all, I don't know if the sharing economy is something you're familiar with. Is Uber or Airbnb, are they here in Phoenix? Okay, they're not sharing companies. Let's just be clear about this. Okay, nobody's sharing anything, right, on either of those sites. They're selling access to certain resources, but they're not sharing anything. However, there are platforms where people are sharing things. One of them is very familiar to you. It's called a library. But others are things like tool libraries and seed catalogs and neighbor sharing kinds of things. So the sharing economy is deliberately hanging on the edge of this because it's not quite clear how this is all going to shake out. In fact, in the blueprint, I argue that this is going to be an enormous area of local legislative and regulatory activity for at least the next year, which has both positives and negatives for nonprofits and communities. Because if you just can identify that as something your local city council is going to be spending a lot of time on, that may or may not be a good thing for what you're trying to do. I want to also flag the informal networks and the not invented yets. In fact, informal networks do matter significantly in the digital age. These are, groups of friends getting together and making something happen. It's about as new as, I don't know, Mount Sinai. It's not a new phenomenon. It's been going on for as long as there have been humans. But on the digital age, with digital tools, we can do it at a different kind of scale and at a different pace. So, big deal, faster, bigger. But they're also very temporal. They don't tend to last. And they can make some very, very interesting things happen. The other thing that's important to notice is this not invented yet category, which is to say this big bubble here in the space of social businesses, B Corps, and L3Cs. Anybody know how long we've had those? About 5 years. About 5 years. So you take the fact that we've created a whole new space, a whole new subsection in the last 5 years. We've got this dynamic space over here that moves and shakes and can move at great size and speed and then pass on. And you've got the likelihood that it's going to recombine into something that hasn't been invented yet. Oops, here we have something that's been invented. Just this year, people are starting to ask, how do you actually, what's the enterprise form to manage the data? These are new enterprise forms to manage money for social good. What's a new enterprise form to manage digital data? Again, it's less than a year old. It's not even an official thing. Some folks are calling them information fiduciaries. But the point being, this sandbox, if it will, of the kinds of places where good can happen, where good is the core purpose of the enterprise, it's very, very dynamic. It's going to keep changing. We need to keep our eyes on that. Part of the reason it's going to keep changing is because of where the money's coming from. That space person is you. okay? You have, each of us has all of these choices about how to use a dollar to make the good happen that we want to see in the world. All day, every day. Some of us do this on a fairly small scale. I'm not moving hundreds of thousands of dollars. I'm barely moving thousands of dollars. However, this is the same set of choices that Bill Gates has. Pierre Omidyar, Jeff Skoll. Those last two being significant donors who've organized their enterprises for their giving to allow them to differentiate these three of the 5 choices. So the Omidyar Network, Jeff Skoll's foundation, Participant Media, the Global Threats Fund. He's got a portfolio of organizations, each of which works across different ones of those. But you have the same choices. And all the people you're seeking to join your fundraising efforts or your giving efforts, or when they're thinking about what they're going to do with their money, they have those same choices for that dollar. This is a vastly more complicated universe than one nonprofit vying for a dollar against another nonprofit. But that's where we live nowadays. Now, crowdfunding. Are you familiar with the term? How many of you have used a crowdfunding platform, Kickstarter or Indiegogo or any of the other thousands of these things? What did you do on it?
Saw a product, gave some money. Or actually, one was a friend was starting, putting together a CD and needed some money for it, and donated some money.
Okay, so you gave some money for a CD. There were some hands over here. What did you guys do on it? In the back there? Yeah.
We've done it for smaller, like charitable efforts among like online groups. If a member of the group is having a hard time or something like that, we'll do an anonymous kind of crowdfunding for that particular.
So to help an individual. Great, okay. Another example. Yeah, Marissa.
They were raising money to produce a video of this handicapped woman who was traveling overseas to inspire people in different countries on how she had overcome her disabilities.
So a video effort. Somebody else, a different example if you got one? Or just something else you've done? Yeah.
We're a scholarship organization. We've helped some of our scholars, especially when they have emergency or needs they didn't think they were going to have. So
okay. So again, helping an individual. Anybody have another example? Seems kind of different. Yeah.
I'm going to put a plug in for it because there's actually 4 hours left on it. So if you want to donate.
Go, go, go.
Our crowdfunding campaign is for a school district to purchase lice shampoo because it keeps Arizona kids in school.
Great. Okay. So the school district is the beneficiary of that. Think about those examples. We've got a CD, a video, individuals in need, a school resource. You mentioned a product. I guess a CD is a product. So here's a question that we actually collectively don't usually know the answer to, which is we're using these platforms, but we don't actually know what we're doing on them. Are we giving money? Are we donating it? Are we getting a tax deduction? Are we investing in something? Are we pre-buying a CD or a video? Sort of, you buy it, you give the money now, they'll make it, you get a copy of it. An awful lot of us are giving just enough money, not to get the actual thing, but maybe like a sticker or a t-shirt. I didn't bring it with me, but I have a clipboard that's just covered with these stickers. And I looked at this one day and I thought, what on earth have I been doing? Right? So the funny thing about crowdfunding, where it mixes into here, is you can actually do all of the above on this. And many of us don't know what we're actually doing there. We're not really putting it into any particular bucket, which is an interesting signal of how we're starting to think about these choices. That the division between the charitable gift, the political investment, I'm supporting a candidate, or I think I'm investing in I'm actually investing in something and getting a piece of it. Those lines are very, very blurry on these crowdfunding platforms. And trust me, the folks running the platforms have every incentive in the world to keep those lines as blurry as possible. So the unblurring of them, if it's going to happen from you and me. Okay, so that's civil society. What digital data am I talking about? Well, I'm not just talking about spreadsheets, okay? I'm talking about the digital data that is all around us and that we are increasingly generating no matter what we do and where we go. So yes, I'm talking about the information that gets swapped on our phones. Everything from your text messages with your kid to your address book, which is on your phone, to all those photos. How many of you have 1,000 or more photos on your telephone? 1,000 photos. We'll come back to that. To the data that's being collected on us remotely that we have sort of no control over, that's a satellite collecting thing. To the data that our cities are building, the sensors and tools that cities are now building in all around us that collect an enormous amount of information that very few of us are actually paying attention to. So these are dumpsters in Philadelphia that are solar powered. They have a scale in the bottom of them and a communication device that communicates to the Department of Public Works. So as you dump your trash in there, the scale figures out when the dumpster is actually full. And the solar power allows the communications device to send a signal to the Department of Public Works that says, the trash bin's full, come empty it. Right? So instead of waiting till Friday, which is trash bin collection day, and having the dumpsters overflow, the Department of Public Works has completely reconfigured how it actually picks up the trash. It couldn't be a more prosaic example of how cities are changing their services. But this is happening all around us. It's happening. There are sensors now in our parking spaces. There are sensors on our buildings. I don't know if you had to tag in or out to get into this building, but that data is being collected when you tag in or out. There's cameras everywhere, including that one right there, staring at me. Right? All of that is data that's being collected, and we're going to see why it's so important to be aware of this. And then, of course, there's our DNA, which blood donors or anyone who's involved in any kind of medical research effort, and I know there's a big biotech industry here, the collection and analysis and digitization of DNA is an enormous opportunity and a great example of how we as people are now donating, literally giving our lifeblood, quite literally, for all kinds of purposes, and not necessarily knowing, as we're doing that, whether we're giving it to a business, whether we're giving it to a nonprofit, whether we're giving it to a public enterprise, and it's unclear to those of us who sit back and watch these behaviors whether or not those distinctions matter. But that's just the sort of most extreme example. So that's digital data and civil society. Got it? Okay, good. Here we go. Here's the boring economics lecture. It's going to be great. Anybody still need their phone back yet? No, you're doing okay? All right, good. You do know, of course, that even while your new friend has your phone, if you needed to get some of the information that's on it, you could get that, right? Right? Anybody have an Apple device, for example? Yeah. And then you sync it with your computer? So the data itself that's on your device, imagine your friend leaves today with your phone. And all you got, well, you did get her name and her phone number, but, right? You can get the data back. You can't get the phone back, but you can get the data back. Everybody understand this? That's the difference. That's the economics lecture. If I give you my telephone, I don't have it. It's that simple. It's that simple. But I can get the data. So now we have an interesting issue. I can't see your first name, sir. Michael. Michael and I both have my data. So does Apple, by the way. Now, only Michael has my phone. But we all three have my data. It's a fundamentally different economic asset. What we're going to ask ourselves in a minute is, okay, so if Michael's got my data, I've got my data, and Apple's got my data, how could I possibly donate my data? Because all these people have copies of it. How could I ever give it away when I still have a copy of it? All the rest of the words on the screen, they speak to that point. Okay? It's a fundamentally different thing than, say, money. which is what we're used to structuring philanthropy around, or time. If I donate an hour to your organization, that was it. That's the hour. I don't have it anymore. But we can do very different things with digital data. It also does all these other things. It lasts a really long time. None of us know. There's not a human on the planet who knows what it's like to live their entire life with all of this information about them that's been collected from all of these resources and is now being stored somewhere else where someone else is making decisions about it. A whole lifetime's worth of that information. Yet we all live in that world now. So our kids, for example, all of their school information, all of their immunization records, all of that stuff. And we too. But we don't know what it's like to live in that world. So we're going to have to figure it out. We're going to have to create some new rules about this. Practices and rules. Any questions about any of this? So I'm trying not to kill you with the economic lecture. But if you don't get it, then I want to stick here for a little bit. You got a question? Okay, rest of it? Yeah, please, in the back.
If you were, say, writing a book that would be of value, how would you write it so that it's not available to the public?
Yeah, so
if I do a Word document on my computer, is it secure or not?
Well, is it secure or not, or can you own it or not? Is that your question? Because you're right on a huge issue here, which is that because all of our rules about, say, ownership depend on, our existing rules depend on me being able to have something and you not. Just think about how fundamental that is to everything, right? So for an author, if one copy of a book was all that was ever needed, right? You write it once and you put it out there and everybody copies it endlessly, what does that do to people who want to write? On the other hand, it's great for people who want to read. You know, who's stuck in the middle of this really right now are libraries. So what happens, to answer your question, to give you a specific answer, is that from a technological perspective, from a digital perspective, there's no reason whatsoever that your great American novel, written once, uploaded once, would ever have to be reproduced in any fashion, right? I mean, it's sort of controlled so that you can sell copies of it. So what's been done are some technological fixes to close that down so that, in fact, you can control the copies of it. But it's not a technological, it's a technological fix to a policy problem, right? It was the policies. And usually it's the publishers who've said, whoa, 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 we don't want to only have one copy of every book ever written, right? Because there goes the business model. So there's been things called digital rights management, and it's kind of keys and locks that are additional software put in there to make sure that it's not endlessly copied. There's all kinds of ways around it, but that's what's in place now. And a lot of people say absolutely must have it. A lot of people say it's just in the way, I don't want it. And authors and readers both. So we're coming up with policy solutions to technological possibilities. That's really what we're doing in all aspects of this space. Yeah?
Haven't you just described the Sony problem?
Yeah, yep. Yeah. And Apple iTunes and Kindle books and all of it. Has anybody here ever borrowed an ebook from the library? Did you wonder why you can only borrow it for 2 weeks? Yes. Yeah. What's up with that? That's digital rights management software right there. Did you ever wonder why you had to wait to get a copy of it from the library? Digital rights management. And that's, you know, Sony trying to, we could talk about Sony all day, but we won't. So yeah, these are not the native qualities of digital data. These things over here are so different from tangible objects, which is what our economy and laws are built on, that we're literally in a new space trying to forward apply backwards assumptions, if you will. So what needs to be created are the rules that actually fit. That's the great moment we're in where we get to figure this all out. So let me just say one other thing, because as foundations, I can keep this conversation super abstract, but I want to make it very specific to you as organizations for 1 second. Here's my thermodynamics lecture, okay? It's going to be 1 slide long, I promise you. What I want to make sure everybody agrees with me on is that the actual stuff, so the great American novel, the content, the story, the prose, all of that, the information itself is the same regardless of whether you, nice that we have these, right? Regardless of whether you get it in this form or you go to Grant Craft's website and download a PDF version of it. The stuff, what it says is the same. In this version, the hard copy print version, it's equivalent to an ice cube. You can control it. The Foundation Center has printed 1,000 copies of that document. You guys have 50 of them. There's 950 left for the rest of the world. That's it. Get through the rest of the 950 and they're done. We can count them, we could track them. It's very easy to control information in this form. When it's on the website of Grant Craft, as a PDF, it acts more like water. It says the same thing, right? But it's much more available. You guys can go back to your offices, download a copy, make copies of the copy, and give them to everybody in your office, right? That's the reason. It's free. Anybody can have it. Have at it. Now you'll notice when you go there that it's in a PDF format because there's a limit to just how much I want to give away to you all. I worked for 3 months on that document. I don't want you messing with the graphics. I don't want you changing the prose. If you want to do that, you can, but it's going to be a pain in the backside to do it. PDF is digital rights management software. You can download it, but you can't do anything with it except read it, right? But heck, I'm giving it to you for free, so thank you, right? What I didn't give you is the document that I have on my laptop that you could go in and edit and mess around with and move the pictures around and say, that's the dumbest graphic I ever saw, and what a stupid sentence that is, Lucy, and really you forgot this. I didn't put it up there in the most mixable form, which is Steam. Okay, in this analogy, this is a metaphor. I'm known for them, but sometimes people hate them. The information itself is the same. The author or the organization, me or your foundation, makes these decisions all day long about how to share your information. So you may be putting your annual report out in a PDF, your grants list online in a searchable but not downloadable database, or your grants information out in a completely downloadable and remixable database. You make these choices. And you've got to start making them in line with your mission. That's the point here. The example that's on the bottom of the slides, and there's a copy of this slide deck for everybody, is the current state of affairs for us all in using 990 data. Right? We're at the ice cube. We're at the cup of water stage here. But very, very soon we'll be at the steam stage. Does this work for folks?
So,
yeah.
What I'm trying to figure out, data is only valuable if it can be monetized.
Oh, really?
Well, I mean, it ultimately it all boils down to that, because you can write the great American novel, but if no one's going to buy it, the only person that makes happy is you per se.
What about all the readers? It wouldn't be the great American novel unless all the readers read it.
But in order for you to create that economy, there has to be some level of payback. So from a foundation side, it would be kind of the impact we would make about the information we're providing. On the flip side, on the philanthropy side, the monetization of that is what they're doing with their services.
So what about the value of the polio vaccine? An idea that was never patented and was given away freely so that the entire world could be vaccinated against polio, thereby saving hundreds of millions of lives and generating a biotech revolution. You don't have to lock down an idea and make money on it for there to be value.
No. No, that I get, but that's where the philanthropy part comes into it. So that on the philanthropy side, we're gathering this data to make that impact of it all. but there's still monetization to that, because you couldn't have created that polio vaccine without having the ability to do so and to talk about it. And that data going out, there was a cost to it. So that's the monetization that I'm talking about.
Well, there's a cost, but you're not talking about monetization. Here's the tricky part, and this is why I make your eyes glaze over with this definition. Private resources for public benefit. Here's what we know how to do in our current information money equation. We know how to make something private and make money off of it. That's actually the marketplace. And we know how to make something public and have it funded publicly. That's the government. We don't have rules for data that's created, or the great American novel that's created, with or without philanthropic resources. Where do we set the limits on open and closed when what we actually care about is that public benefit? How do we do this? You're exactly right, but we don't know how to do it. You're actually going to have a hard time finding an IP lawyer who even understands that question. They don't go, no, that's not the equation I know how to work with. Any IP lawyers in the room? So thank you for that, because this is exactly what we're trying to do. We're trying to take, and this is exactly what's happening around us. And what I'm trying to urge you to do is jump in and get excited about this and become part of it. Because we know a lot now about digital data and infrastructure and all those things I just talked about how it works differently, right? And we have a whole set and hundreds of years of cultural experiences about doing good things for other people and being able to express yourself freely and come together peacefully and be private in your decision making about what you want to do, which is another core part of being engaged in civil society, is for Michael and I to decide we together want to go do something, but not necessarily having to tell the rest of you about it, or not being obligated to do it as taxpayers, right? We make the decision privately. This is hugely important right now when you think about the protest space of civil society, to say nothing of the expressive space. Because my idea of the great American novel may be something that isn't going to make a penny for somebody else, but I still have the right to make it, right? It's not all about money. So we have this set of values operating in this space, and we don't know what this is. We need to create it. We need to make it work. So let me give you a little more specific examples. But if you're feeling like, whoa, how do these two things add up? Good. Because that's what I spend my days in. That's the equation I'm trying to figure out. And you all are doing this in your daily life, whether you recognize it or not. And we're all going to be inventing it together in the next 5 or 10 years. So let me give you a little bit of a sense of what's already out there. Okay? There's a whole set of new types of organizations out there, many of which you're probably quite familiar with. Everybody know what this logo is? Yeah. That's the one most people know. Do you know what this one is? Creative Commons. It's a copyright. Do you know what this one is? Mozilla. It's an internet browser. They are all not-for-profit organizations that only exist because of digital assets. There would be they would have existed. There's no reason to have a nonprofit creating an internet browser in a pre-digital age. We might have needed, but we didn't have any opportunity to create a whole new intellectual property licensing regime before the digital age. There's countless other things like this, but these are the ones I thought you'd be most familiar with. So first and foremost, we have a whole new sector of the nonprofit space that we didn't have a decade and a half ago. We also have these weird new relationships between things. So these are examples. I'm going to go through these quickly. But Crisis Commons I want to talk about because it is an example of the informal network. So is anybody here familiar with Crisis Commons? In 2010, prior to 2010, there had been a small group of people in DC who happened to all work in information technology for the government and for the Red Cross. So these were people who cared a lot about technology and disaster response, specifically. And they'd been meeting. They were having coffee. They had, a couple of meetups. They got together. It was just a very small community of people talking about the things that interested them. When the earthquake hit Haiti, in January of 2010, that group of people got together and said, hey, we should do something about this. And they emailed their friends, and they decided they would spend, the earthquake hit on a Tuesday, they decided they'd get together on a Saturday, and they'd see what they could come up with that could be useful. These are like, a dozen people in Washington, D.C., they're thousands of miles from Haiti. Well, they were also IT professionals, they were very well connected digitally. So they let everybody else they knew know that they were going to do this. By the time they got together on Saturday in Washington, there were 50 other groups of their peers around the world getting together also. And because they were digitally connected, they were able to sort of track their conversations online so that the group in Alexandria knew what the group in Paris was talking about, as did the group in Bangkok. They kept this going for over 6 months of people, not always the same group, but usually, volunteers coming together and building things. Well, what did they build? They built an app that was downloadable for free so that the text messages that were written in Creole could be translated into English, and the US Department of Defense could use them to help in the recovery effort. Now, what is Crisis Commons? Crisis Commons is a nothing. They don't exist as an enterprise. And when people tried to help them exist, both the State Department and the Sloan Foundation in New York tried to say, oh, you should incorporate and become a nonprofit and do this over and over again. They said, get out of here. It takes Red Bull and pizza. We don't want your money. We don't want your rules. Leave us alone. That was 2010. 2014, they're still going. They still do this. And they do not only this kind of big disaster kind of stuff, but some of them have become deeply involved in city emergency management responses and are helping, like the city of Toronto, improve the way its ambulances work. Which brings us to things like Code for America. Are you familiar with Code for America? I don't know if there's a Phoenix group. It's a national nonprofit. It basically puts techies into government, helps local governments improve the way they work with citizens. So they create all kinds of new tools, new websites, new digital apps, new ways to communicate with your DMV, and all those fun things, pay your parking tickets, register your dog, all those things we love to do. But it's a not-for-profit putting volunteers inside city governments. Doesn't make sense in most concepts of what civil society does. We have these whole new forms. This is an international collection of all the libraries in Europe, throughout Europe, that are creating a common structure to digitize all of the cultural materials in libraries, archives, and museums throughout Europe. And of course it's connected to the one in the US, because why wouldn't it be? It's digital. So what the heck is that? This, just to say, the world's changing around you. We've got crazy new funding behaviors out there. We talked about this a little bit with the crowdfunding. Possible is the biggest crowdfunding platform in Australia. But that's one of the examples of one of the things they're doing. What the heck is that? Oh my gosh. What is that? What kind of behavior is that? Right? We don't know. But it's happening all around us. And then we've got this big question of how are we going to give it away? Literally, how are we going to give away data? I brought these two examples are about DNA. And it's important. I spent a lot of time looking at medical research foundations and medical research in general, because this is where this is happening most at the grandest scale right now, is people are donating their DNA for all kinds of things. Sometimes they realize they're doing it, like the T1D Exchange, which is a not-for-profit organization that is gathering DNA samples from people and with type 1 diabetes and related to them so that they can fund massive, massive research studies on this stuff. This, on the other hand, is the Personal Genome Project. Anybody familiar with this? This is an open source genome. Send them your blood, they'll sort out your genome from it, they'll upload the data into an open data set. It's not managed by anybody, there's no limits on how you can use it. It's the human genome, they see it as a public benefit. Was it a private resource? You bet. There's no more private resource than my blood. But it's going out into the open, competing against commercial companies like 23andMe and things like this. Humans are very weird. We can't figure out how we want to do this stuff. This is an emerging idea frame from the UN about how to donate other digital data. Because of course it's not just our blood. It's our Twitter stream. It's our Facebook pages. It's are text messages that can be donated and sense can be made with them. But how are we going to do it? We've got to figure it out. We don't really know how to do this. Here's the other thing, and I'll give you one homework assignment. Well, it's holidays, but you can think about this. Hopefully this will spark some interesting thinking for you. There's also a new social calculus we have to figure out for all nonprofits and philanthropy. And it goes a little bit to your comment about intellectual property. But here's the story, and you'll see where I'm going with this. So are there crisis counseling centers in Arizona?
Yeah, sure.
Call the 800 number and somebody helps you. Has anybody here ever volunteered for one or worked at one? So it's usually, describe it for me just a little bit, just how it works.
Ours, in San Luis Obispo, California, it was 24 hours, 24/7, all volunteer except for one professional, and they were trained in being on that line, and eventually became a 211.
Yeah.
And they provided that in between the person who needs information and wants to talk, and needs someone to interpret what they really need, and then provide that resource.
Great. So they're a connector, they're volunteers, they're trained in a certain kind of exchange, and they're a friendly ear in a moment of crisis. They're all over the place. They're fabulous resources. They tend to work on the telephone, right? They're hotlines. Anybody seen a teenager lately? Have you seen them do this? They do this. They don't do this. So this doesn't work. You're not going to get a kid in crisis to call you. You get a kid in crisis to text you. So Crisis Text Line, which is a New York-based not-for-profit organization, and it's got a fascinating backstory, but I'm going to skip it, is helping crisis counseling centers, probably the one in San Luis Obispo and the one in Phoenix, I don't know, switch from phone to text. What I love about this story is it couldn't seem less interesting, right? You're going, instead of this, you're going to do this. What could be interesting about it? Well, let me tell you what's interesting about it. Lots of things. First of all, the type of things kids were calling in about, or texting in about, totally different set of problems. They were also texting in, these are sad stories, it's a crisis line, but they were texting in things like, he's hitting me and he's in the next room. Can't do that on the telephone, can you? You're never going to get that on a phone call. Or I'm in the restroom and the girls are outside waiting for me. You cannot, the whole world opened up of the actual substance of the service. Then they realized, for example, that those counselors who were volunteers were being, they were engaging with the people, but they were trying to make the connection and get off the phone. And one of the data scientists who was building this thing said to the counselor, how come you never ask them if they want to follow up? And the counselor said, well, because we don't do it that way. Because in the phone world, what are you going to do? Call them back? No, is Bobby home? He called me, he was in Crichton. That doesn't work that way, right? Well, you can do it with a text message. So at the end of each exchange, they started saying, would you like to hear back from us in a week? And 85% of the kids said, yes, please. So just the substance of the service was different. But here's the other thing. Here's why we need a new social calculus. What happens with all those text messages?
Saved forever.
They can be saved forever. On both this organization's servers and those other key members of civil society, Comcast, Verizon, T-Mobile, AT&T, right? Anybody here from any of those companies? They're key parts of civil society now, folks. All of our stuff is traveling through things they own. In fact, read your terms of service. They own it. Okay? So how do you do this? First of all, they realized that all of those text messages offered a whole new research data set into the crises facing young people. This was great stuff for researchers and policymakers and school principals. But how do you get the kid to say, yes, it's okay for you to use my data any way you want, when she's texting you in crisis from a bathroom? Because I know that each and every one of you has read that 28-page, 9-point font terms of service document that confronts you when you're on a new website, right? So you know you've just signed away your firstborn child. You can't do it. It doesn't work. But that's what has to be figured out. Because the public benefit of the data set could be life-saving. And the private trust with the kid is critical. Can't be one or the other. You need both. We've got to figure it out. And for all of you who are funders here, here's your homework assignment. Think about your grant portfolio. Who are you funding right now who's probably facing this kind of opportunity? And how are you helping them or getting in their way?
Well, and that's also then has the potential to be dangerous.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. Right.
So, yeah.
So you're going to lock down all medical research, not going to collect any data, you're not going to use any of this stuff because it could be dangerous?
No, but that goes to your point of we need to figure out what we're going to do with it.
Absolutely.
Because
how are we going to make it happen?
Exactly. I can see you have a child who, is threatening suicide and then can't get into college because they've done research to figure out that, oh, he's got mental health
That's exactly right. And that goes back to one of those, and you will get these slides in PDF form, but, because I worked hard on this, but it's open access license, it says so right here, the perpetuity of it. Because that's a perfect example. What about the kid who consents to whatever version of a consent form they come up with, and I can tell you some great stories of this, because she wants the help, right? First of all, are you going to not help her if she says no? Should we be banned? That's what Facebook does. That's what Google does. They won't let you in. But you're going to not help a kid because she won't consent to your privacy policies? I hope not. I hope not. So we need to invent that. But let's go back. So the kid consents, and she gets help, and she lives a happy life and goes on, and 10 years later, she's a young mom and decides she'd really like to not be in your data set anymore. How do you do that? I don't know. Let's figure it out. So that's the world we're in. None of those stories are future, folks. Those are, in fact, 2 years old at this point. Older than that in some cases. This is what we need to figure. This is some of what we don't know. Here's a really fun exercise for anybody who wants to do this, by the way. Make a slide of the things you don't know. My slides, this is like 75 pages long. I cut it down for you guys. I don't know a lot of things, but here's some big ones. We don't know who owns what. When Code for America starts working with my fair city government to use the data that the city's collected on me when I paid my parking ticket to make it greater apt to serve the citizens of my fair city, do they now own the data? Does the city own the data? I can vote the city out. I can vote people in the city out. I can't do anything with these guys. How are we gonna make that work? How do you donate digital data? Anybody know David Hockney's work? The painter, British painter, fabulous stuff. It's like 82, 83 years old, 4 or 5 years ago. Somebody gave him an iPad, started painting on it, started emailing his paintings around. Oh, how fabulous. Can you imagine getting an original David Hockney in your email? Hockney thought it was great. His friends thought it was better. Museums and gallerists and agents around the world freaked out. This is your author question. Oh my God, no, stop. How do we do this? It's not just blood, it's art. It's novels. It's my PDF. How do you do it? What do we do about Verizon and Comcast and T-Mobile? Right? There are all these third parties. This is not them. This is the Foundation Center. Right? Familiar friend helping us make sense of grant data. A small piece of the kind of digital data I'd argue your organizations are sitting on. But we have a relationship with the Foundation Center. I'm sure Arizona Grantmakers Forum is constantly encouraging you to contribute your information so that we can all learn from this. This is one kind of relationship between your organization and a third party. But we also need to figure out what we're going to do with Comcast, Verizon, T-Mobile, Facebook, Google, Twitter. They're part of our space now. They don't know it either, don't worry about it. And we need to figure out some really basic questions. And these are the questions you need to figure out at your organizational level. Okay? Each organization needs to figure these things out. What are you going to collect? You do realize that if you have this information, you're liable for this information. You can be subpoenaed for this information. You can be hacked, Sony Pictures, for this information. So in many cases, You may start realizing that you're deciding to do the most countercultural thing there is in the digital age. Don't get it. Don't collect it. Don't take 1,000 pictures of your dog because pictures are cheap. I have 1,000 pictures of my dog. I have 2 dogs and a kid, right? In the old days, I would have paid $7.99, bought a little thing. It would have given me 24 pictures. I'd have 1 picture of my dog, 1 picture of the other dog, and 1 picture of my kid. That would have been fine. We have habituated ourselves to, well, we need all that data. Let's get all of it, all of it, all of it, all of it. What are you going to do with it? I don't know. Think twice. You may not want to get all of it. Really, you just may not want it. What are you going to share? How are you going to do that? What are you going to store? And really, a critical question is, what are you going to destroy and how? And who is going to make those decisions? If you think about your organization, do you even know who would be responsible for making these decisions? Yeah, good. Oh, thank you. Who's going to make the decision?
No, I have a comment.
Oh.
Shoot. Is not perhaps this whole frame that we're looking at a baby boomer frame, though? I mean, you can ask, I ask my kids, all this stuff's about you on the internet, and they're like, I don't care. I really couldn't care less about my data. Do what you want.
Then ask your kid, how old are your children?
19 and 22.
So when they were applying to college, what did they do with their Facebook page?
Well, they scrubbed it. They were
yeah, oh, so they care about their data. Oh, whoops. That's a baby boomer talking to a kid. They care about their data. They just care about it in ways that we don't understand. Right? My mother didn't know what I was talking about when I was talking on the phone in my bedroom where she could hear me, because it was all coded. Right? I wasn't going to tell her that it was really about how so-and-so was messing with so-and-so. I had to use song lyrics or something. That's what they do. Go on your kid's Facebook page, you see a bunch of song lyrics. Don't think, oh, happy day. You might want to go listen to that song, see what they're really trying to say to their friends. I'm not making this up, folks. That's for real. They care about their data. They just care about it in different ways. And what they have to experience, like all of us have to experience as humans, because we were all infallible once also when we were about 18, is a consequence. And getting into college is a really big one. And they're starting to manipulate their data pages. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think, building on what Ellen said, I think there is a generational shift in how you perceive data. I mean, maybe there's data and there's data, but for instance, the Foundation Center has a big initiative to try and get foundations doing research to post their research so it can be shared. Yeah. And I would say that, you know, the current kind of conservative look that everything is proprietary, I don't want to share it, I don't want to share it. And I do think that maybe with a generational shift there will be more change coming. Yeah, sure. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that we are making decisions, but we, you know, based on what Ellen said, have a different frame of reference and attitude towards data than maybe the next generation might have.
So here's how I would sum that up, and I don't disagree with you. I really encourage you not to fall into the trap of thinking 20-year-olds are radically different beings than we are. Okay? We've lived in this world for the most part, and we've mostly opted to this.
Right.
They mostly live in this world and have to be convinced of this, but can often go here. Now, when you're talking about foundation grants data, with the exception of some grants you may be making to human rights activists or reproductive rights activists or people involved in particularly politically charged activities, and if you're not going to include the name and phone number and address, which, you know, really, when and why would you do that? Would you want it up there about you? What's the harm? This mindset needs to think about the possible benefits of this more, and this mindset needs to think about the possible risks. That's all it is. They're not radically different human beings. And you have control over a lot of this stuff. Not all of it, but a lot of it. So here's I'm going to wrap this up, but basically, here's another metaphor, because I can use about 700 in one talk, but we're back to water. So we have a whole lot of rules and practices and defaults for managing time and money. That's actually what most philanthropies and nonprofits do, and some ice cube information, right? So think about that as land, right? We have a whole lot of rules and practices for how things work on land, but digital data is much more like water than it is like land. So here's where we are. We're right where these two things meet, right? And here's what we're doing, however. This is a lake in Louisiana. It's a beautiful houseboat, right? And it's floating, it's not sinking. But I don't know if you want to take it into this kind of environment, right? We've really pretty much been taking the practices we know and are familiar with, and without questioning, sort of setting them out to sea. And I don't think that's the way, I don't think that's going to work for us for very long. We actually need to create some whole new means of transportation and housing here. And here's where it's starting. Again, this is not futuristic. This work is happening. In fact, I'd encourage you, if you're interested, we'd welcome your participation in some things we're building at Stanford. But we are working on creating a spectrum of rights about data. Because I care much more, I care differently about my DNA than I do about my Twitter stream. And you might also. As a foundation, you might care much more in the Sony vein about your employees' salaries and health information than about your grant making, which is public anyway. Right? So we need a spectrum of behaviors, but we also need a spectrum of rights, because this isn't about other people, folks. This is about us. We need new practices and rules for data philanthropy, and we're working on it. We're figuring it out. It won't be perfect, but we'll get there. And we welcome your participation in that. This we're actually doing at Stanford with some of the big companies mentioned earlier. We need to really understand how we're going to use the third-party data infrastructure, so the Foundation Center data, or GuideStar, or Open 990 data, how we want to use that so we can use it well and design it accordingly, not just let it happen. Your organizations, each of us, should be thinking about this. How to govern and manage digital data at your organization and your nonprofit partners is the single most important capacity building issue facing the sector right now. Everybody's got to do it. And many organizations haven't done it. So there's a whole set of tools to help with that we're building out. There will be a free website filled with templates and tools and downloadable policies and uploadable with your contributions as well to help that happen. Are you familiar with Nolo Press? Remember Nolo Press used to help you? You could download a Mad Libs kind of form to create your articles of incorporation or your bylaws. Well, we're headed there with this stuff. And we hope to have it live in the next couple of months. It won't be Mad Libs. It'll be a little bit more like TurboTax, because these are value-laden questions. Your organization and your organization and your organization, they have totally different values about how you want to do this. But the suite of policies is fairly standard. And we've got contributions from some of the country's biggest foundations and nonprofits who've been able to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on the lawyers to figure this stuff out. And we're going to use that resource for public benefit and make it available. So email me if you'd like to contribute, or if you'd like to see a dummy version of it in its current state. So that's what we're working on. We're all a part of it. I hope that each of you will think a little bit differently about how this plays out in your personal life and in your organizational life. There's some more stuff you can download if you want it. It's all free. And I now encourage you to please return the phone to its rightful owner. Thank you.
We have maybe time for one or two questions. Anyone not totally overwhelmed that might actually have a question for Lucy that you can answer before she leaves?
You've asked great questions all the way throughout.
Back of the back end.
Can we use crowdfunding for fundraising for our foundation?
Sure. Just let me ask you a question. What are you going to do with the data?
The data?
Yeah. Everybody who interacts on that crowdfunding platform is giving you data, is leaving data, is creating data. So absolutely go forward, use it for your foundation, talk to your lawyer, but first of all, think about what you're going to do with the data. And good luck. I hope you accomplish whatever you're trying to accomplish.
Okay, with that, I just have, first of all, thank you so much, Lucy, again. Round of applause. It's just a good thing we have now the holiday season to think about this, because I don't think this would be digestible in overnight. I think we're going to have to ponder your remarks. what I'd like to do is just remind you of what's coming up next year. We've got on your table tents that remind you about upcoming programs. January 22nd, the overview of the Arizona legislative agenda. Chris Hurston's coming back. He was one of our highlights last year, and he's agreed to come back on the 22nd, so join us for that. Read on Arizona, Why Literacy Matters No Matter Who You Fund, and that's on February 24th. That's another important program. And then finally, February 26th, conversations between national and Arizona funders on civic engagement. First time that national funders are coming here and talking with Arizona funders about who's funding what and how do we work collaboratively to perhaps increase the civic engagement space in Arizona. So with that, please fill out your evaluation forms, leave your name tags behind. There are cookies and all sorts of goodies in the back, so grab some dessert on your way out, and we won't see you till the new year. Happy holidays.
I forgot in my earlier remarks to cue a slideshow that we had actually prepared for Marissa. Photos, so if kind of like the ending credits at the end of the movie, you want to hang out and maybe go or have a good laugh. You're welcome to stay and get some cookies and enjoy the slideshow. So thank you.
Do I get a copy?
Yes.